So when we're thinking about changing it from major to minor, you have your two notes in the scale and or in the interval, sorry, and you want to shrink it. So that means either this one has to go down or this one has to go up to make the interval smaller. But we still want it to be a third, so you can't change where they're written on the staff, which means you have to alter them with flats and sharps. And remember, sharps raise the pitch, flats lower the pitch. So to shrink using to shrink using the bottom note, you put a sharp on it to make it go up towards the top note. To shrink the interval using the top note, you put a flat on it to make it go down towards the bottom. Now let's try it with a perfect interval. To do it with a perfect interval, augmented, and on a perfect interval you skip the minor going down. Now it's just diminished. I'm going to try it with a different key signature. So this time with my whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, I'm going to pick a funky key, and we are going to do it in the key of C flat. So C flat has 7 flats in it, which means, coming back to this, it's going to be B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, C flat, and F flat. So up diatonically we have C, up a whole step is D flat, up another whole step is E flat, up a half step from E flat is F flat. Yes. E natural, F flat. Yep. And up a whole step from F flat is G flat. Whole step from G flat is A flat. Another whole step is B flat, and up a half step is C flat. Now that is a funky key signature, and we're going to look at some perfect intervals. So the perfect intervals are unison, fourths, fifths, and octaves. Those are the only ones that skip the minor stage when you shrink the interval by half a step. It goes straight to diminished. So if we have a perfect fourth, 1, 2, 3, 4, perfect fourth up from C flat is F flat. Perfect fourth. We write that on the staff. And I'm going to write the key signature first. So we have a B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, C flat, and F flat. There's our key signature. So first I have a C, and up a fourth is an F. 1, 2, 3, 4. And if I want to make this augmented, but stay in the key of C flat, that means I need to change the F. And augmented means we are growing the interval. Instead, up here we did diminished, we shrunk it, or minor. Now we're going to expand the interval, but still keeping it written on the same notes. So to expand, changing the F, right now it's an F flat, so we're going to make it an F natural. And now we have an augmented fourth, or in other words, a tritone, which, if you remember in the book, we talked about tritones mean there are 3 whole steps in the interval. So we look over here, it was 2 whole steps and a half step, but we just turned this half step into a whole step by raising this half a step. And that in in medieval music was a forbidden chord. They called it the devil in music, and nobody ever used the tritone. But now more in modern music, it's more commonly used, but it's still you know, kind of a taboo chord. So there's our tritone, or augmented fourth. If we were to make it diminished, we still write the notes in the same spot. We have C flat and F flat, but this time we want to shrink the interval. So right now we have an F flat, and now we need to make it an F double flat, meaning it is lowered by another half step. And there you have a diminished perfect. Well, it's no longer perfect because it is now a diminished fourth. And if you wanted just a regular old perfect fourth, that's how you would write it. If you do not write the key signature, so if this wasn't here, then you would need to write the accidentals right next to it. If you write the key signature, you don't have to write the accidentals unless it is an altered note, like one of these. You're changing it from what's written in the key signature. But the C flat for these two notes is already written in the key signature right there. So you don't need to write the accidental next to those two. Okay, now the only other tricky thing with this is if you are given the top note and asked to find a note below the top note. So we're still going to use the pattern whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. This time I am going to say, here's our staff, and we'll do it in bass clef. And I am going to give you an E flat. I don't have a key signature written, so I have to write the accidental right next to the E. And say, find a major sixth below E flat. Now you could start and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So here is my sixth below. 3, 4, 5, 6, yep. So this bottom note is, think in your head, what note is that? It's a G. So we have G and E flat are the two notes in our chord. Now, how do you know if that is major or minor or augmented? What in the world is the quality of that chord? So it's a sixth, we know that. And I am going to take E flat, and I know the E flat is going to be the sixth of this key. So we'll have a note 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this E flat goes in the sixth spot in our scale pattern. Now you can fill in the rest of the notes following this pattern of whole steps and half steps to figure out what key signature are we in. So up a whole step from E flat, half a step would be E natural, another half step would be F natural. Up a half step from F would be F sharp, but in a scale we have to go diatonically. So we already used the F, we can't use F. So this is a G. Up a half step from F would be G flat. If we go backwards this way, we know this one has to be a D. Whole step below E flat, down a half step is D. Another half step would make it D flat. A whole step down from D flat, if we go down a half step, we have C natural. Another half step would be C flat or B natural, but because we're going diatonically in a scale, it has to be something altered from C. So C flat. Down a half step from C flat, which you can think enharmonically as B natural, would be B flat. Down another whole step from B flat would be, half step down is a half step down is A natural. Sorry, sometimes I have to think about it a little harder too. And another half step is A flat. Almost there. So now our top note is the same as the last one. A whole step down from A flat is G flat. So we are in the key of G flat major, which, looking at our circle of fifths, G flat's down here. It has 6 flats in it. B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, and C flat. And if we look at our pattern, we have B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, and C flat. There you go. So now we can find that a sixth below E flat is G flat, which means this needs to be a flat to get a major sixth. Now, if we wanted to write this, remember here's our major. If we expand it, it's augmented. If you shrink, it's minor. If you shrink again, it is diminished. So here's our visual for expanding, sharp, flat, and visual for shrinking, flat, sharp. Now I want to make this minor sixth using those same, or major sixth, using these same notes, G and E. I want to make it a minor sixth. This time I'm going to keep G flat the same, which means I'm shrinking the interval. Shrinking, I need to change the top note. I'm going to lower it by half a step. It's already a flat, so now it's a double flat. Now you have a minor sixth. If I wanted to change it by changing the bottom note, here's what I had, and now I am going to make it minor again by shrinking. I'm going to raise the bottom pitch. So it was G flat. I shouldn't have written it yet. Now it's going to be G natural. Again, a minor sixth. If you wanted to make it augmented, so we're going to expand our interval. We have G and E. If we're changing the top note, we're going to raise it by a half step. If it's already flat and you're raising it, that means you're changing it to a natural. So now we have E natural. You don't need to write anything because it's an unaltered note now, natural. Unless there is a key signature, or if you're trying to show the difference from this one, if you're writing them right next to each other, then write the natural. If you're only writing this and it's just natural, it's understood that that's natural if there's no key signature. And the bottom one would still be flat. And now you have an augmented sixth. And finally, if you would like to change it by changing the bottom note and keeping this one flat, we take our D flat and we lower it again to expand the interval, and now you have a G double flat that is also an augmented sixth. And that is how you can use the circle of fifths to solve intervals. If you like counting whole steps and half steps, this way will also show you quite easily, without memorizing the chart, how many whole steps and half steps are in between notes in an interval. So if you were to think about a third, here's 1, 2, 3. The third has 2 whole steps in that interval. A fourth has 2 whole steps and a half step in the interval. A fifth has 2 whole steps, a half step, and another whole step. It can get a little confusing the bigger intervals you get. So if it's helpful, you could also think about if you're doing a major seventh, you're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Here's the octave, 8. A major seventh is a half step below the octave. So you could, if somebody asks you, what's a major seventh above G flat? You can think, well, an octave above G flat is G flat, and then you go down a half step and you have F, and that is the major seventh. So this will help you visualize the pattern. If you have a piano, this is pretty much what you would see on a piano as you're looking at the keys. But if you don't have access to a piano, or you don't know how to play the scales on a piano, this is an easy way to write it out. Anytime, if you just memorize this pattern and plug in a note, either the starting pitch or any interval above the starting pitch, then you can figure out the rest of it using the pattern of whole steps and half steps for a major scale. And then alter it using this pattern to get any other quality of interval from the major scale. Let me know if you have questions.